we see the truth of nihilism by a light that is not itself nihilistic. There's a light that allows us to see the truth of nihilism that in an inverse way actually shows us that nihilism isn't true. Because the light, that we see something to be true at all seems to indicate a light that isn't simply dependent upon our construction. And if nihilism is one construction, then it can be taken apart, it can be deconstructed and so on. That's not, I wouldn't deny that. Just as certain configurations of a religious being can be taken apart and their relativity, their limitations exposed. But we're already in a space, I sometimes use, we're in the between, that testifies mysteriously to an enabling power or enabling powers that don't get foregrounded in the constructions that we make. We live in the constructions and forget the enabling powers. And part of philosophy and spiritual life is to try and keep mindfulness of these enabling powers more to the fore, remember them, especially when we get into a configuration which seems to be a dead end, because in a certain sense, nihilism leads to nothing. And then I don't think it's enough then to just begin to preach about human freedom and our ability to create values. That seems to me to be another, it evades the full dimensions of nihilism by trying to rehabilitate the human person as the creator of values. But that can't be, for me, that's not nihilistic enough in relation to ourselves. Again, in my work, I talk about this, the return to zero. There's a return to zero that nihilism enables, but zero can be an interface with creation, a new interface with creation. It needn't be, again, just simply the dismantling of all previous constructions. It can be that point of opening in which the renewal of these more secret and I think also perennial and constant endowments of being, of human being, can be renewed.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Circling Dialogos. If you are inspired by what we talk about on this channel and want to dive deeper and in fellowship with others, there's a number of ways you can do that. One is to become my client and work one-on-one with me. We also have circling events every week open to the public. We also do weekend intensives for circling every 4 to 6 weeks or so. And we have a year-long Art of Circling practitioner training program. We also have self-study programs that you can do at your own pace. All the relevant links, including my email, is below in the show notes. Please let me know if you have any questions.
One of the big comments, reoccurring comments that I've noticed from our videos, a couple that we shot there, is the Irish people are like, I had no idea there was an Irish thinker like him.
But my face, I'm not known in my native land.
Okay.
There are people who have posted on and off just wondering why it's not known in terms of the work that I do. Ireland hasn't been always a very hospitable place for philosophers in the fuller sense. It's tended to put the stress on the prestige on poets and artists generally. But it doesn't, this book that will be published in November, it's not that it tries to redress that, but there are significant thinkers who are Irish. And I think that I hope that I can join their ranks in some form or other. So there's certain particular sort of intonation or idiom, some of the things that I do, but it's not just simply localized in a narrow sense. It has a more universal appeal, I hope. I've lived significant periods in the States. I have my sons are born in Baltimore. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I go back and forth. I'll be going back to Villanova again. For just a 6-week visit in the middle of October or middle of September. So yearly visit Villanova will continue for another number of years. Even though my first home and my first love, I suppose, is Irish, and
Yeah.
much of my proximate family are still living in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a life in America. I'm more well known in America than in Ireland, to be sure. Though the professional philosophers know that I'm around, but in a kind of more public sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the book that I'm publishing now probably go over the heads of a lot of people in the sense that they're
Yeah.
not always dedicated to thinking, just simply to thinking about things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's the danger generally in literary culture. It
Yeah.
tends not to dwell on things in certain ways and tends to
Yeah.
treat philosophy as if it's a set of mere abstractions, which it is.
Right.
It can be. I know it can be, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. I don't think that what I do deal in is mere abstractions, to be honest.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah. I get the sense with philosophy, it's like philosophy at some deeper level is not something that you can pick up and do and not do for a while. There's a deeper sense of, I think Heidegger would talk about it as we are the beings for which our being is in question.
It's in question. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not something you can turn on and turn off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if you're not explicitly writing something or working something out,
Yeah.
the kind of secret work of thinking is ongoing all the time. That's my own experience anyway. I might seem
Yeah.
to be doing nothing,
Yeah.
but doing nothing is sometimes actually something is taking shape
Yeah.
out of mind, but not in a mindless way. And it can come then to mindfulness and to
Yeah.
proper articulation in words. But a style of philosophizing too is, even though I can claim credentials to the kind of trade union of academic philosophers, I have developed an idiom and a style and a singular way of thinking that it's I hate to say it, but it's Desmond. This is the way Desmond thinks about things. And
Yeah.
as I'm getting old now, I don't apologize for. I've been through the races all my life, and I know what's out there. And
Yeah.
I've taken the measure of many thinkers, and I've tried to be honest and open to as many currents of thought that I think are fruitful. And
Yeah.
and yet I have a way of thinking that this is mine. And
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I've really appreciated about your work is there's a generosity to the thinkers that you take up. Like you're not just antagonistic. You draw.
I do sometimes disagree with people, but I try not to disagree merely in the modality of saying no.
Yeah.
I try to figure out where someone is coming from. And then in that sense, it's Hegelian in a certain sense, placing the position of the other within a context which allows you to see the strengths of the other, while not necessarily thinking that the last word has been said.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that in relation to the question of nihilism, and I could understand totally where Briss coming from, but the context of Mormon vision of the world, I don't think the alternatives are Mormonism and atheism, as at times seem to come across at times. Mormonism, as she had experienced it, was religion for her. Religion is a house of many mansions. Some of them are a little less, are more open even to the possibility of nihilism and seeing something in nihilism that could be more purgative, if I could use that word, or more, that the experience of nihilism could be, in fact, the deconstruction of all false gods, which the taking apart of false images of divinity can be an absolutely essential ingredient in opening up to some truer access or truer openness or receptivity to the divine.
Totally. Like in nihilism could be, I think what you're saying could be a gateway into that deeper opening.
It could, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think it has been generally under the influence of Sartre and people like that. It hasn't been taken up in that way.
Yeah.
I think in the case of Nietzsche was an essentially religious thinker.
Yes.
And he certainly was he came to, indeed, I really do think he came from a certain Lutheran background and certainly turned against this very, very hostilely he tried to understand it. The figure of Christ he could never get away from, really.
Yeah.
But I think his impulses were fundamentally religious, or there was a sacred search in his part for a sense of the universe itself as manifesting some more ultimate God. He uses the word Dionysus, but again, Dionysianism is a religion. It's a religious way of speaking about a different sense of divinity, a different sense of sacredness.
Yeah.
So to turn him into a kind of a mere neutral, secularist atheist is to me a complete, complete misunderstanding of of his soul.
Oh, totally. He was almost he was religiously tortured with the questions of religion and ultimately
tormented.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
totally.
But I think in America, I've thought about this a lot. Existentialism, you see this in academic departments when they teach existentialism and so on. Sartre and Camus are often very popular with both the teachers and the students. And I think that Camus had a certain moral integrity of sorts, but their positions they can be beginning positions, it seems to me, but to take them as the place where you take your stand is to me just it's a bit, to be honest with you, I feel as if it's adolescent. It appeals to the desire to throw off the old law, say there's no law, I'm going to create myself and make my sovereign individuality count in the world. But there's so much more richness and complexity to life, including one's own individual life. That can be the beginning of something, but it has to undergo many transformations to be true.
Totally.
Maybe you say it's a philosophy of freedom, but freedom comes in many shades, and not all forms of freedom are necessarily freedom. For the void is still a void freedom in the end. And so on. But again, I see this in the way undergraduates are in love with Sartre and Camus. Sartre in particular is this kind of the early Sartre, total freedom. There's no God. You're totally responsible for yourself. But for me, then, the idea of total responsibility begins to decay the minute you begin to think about it. If there's no sense of ethical measure, that's if we said the universe as a whole is absurd. The resort to saying that we have to create our own meaning doesn't. I think that resort just runs into the dust, because if we're part of the meaningless whole, everything that we do is itself in the end ultimately meaningless, and the whole thing collapses. There's more at play in the situation.
And isn't it even like to want the freedom? Is it already itself speaking to something beyond, something more meaningful within that freedom, right? That is, there's something about nihilism I've noticed that if you push into it deep enough, something turns that you weren't seeing. I think you had said in one of your books, and it really struck me, was, and it's one of the things that came up in that conversation I wanted to talk with you about with Brittany, is you had said, what is the light upon which illuminates my nihilism?
Sure.
I know I'm nihilist.
How do I see that nihilism? By what light do I see that nihilism is true? Because if nihilism is true, there should be no light by means of which I could see that it is true. So we are in.
One of the things, the reason why it's funny because since meeting you and knowing you and stuff, I'm constantly looking at stuff and reading things and coming across things. And I now have this new piece of my mind that goes, I wonder what William would think about this. I wonder what he would say about this. And with Brittany, why I thought of you was that at the end, I know you didn't watch the second half of it, but at the second half, we had this kind of moving realization of that she's like living in the between. She's really occupying them in a deep way. And it was a real moving kind of recognition, realization. That whole dialogue was really touching to me. Like she was quite something. But what's interesting is one of the things that drew me and how I wanted to talk with her is that she happened to find herself in a particular niche where she counsels and coaches people specifically who are suffering with nihilism and have a tendency to have, and it's basically really smart people, right? Like really highly intellectual people or high IQ people who are suffering with nihilism. And it's interesting because when you think about this, it would make sense to me with somebody who's more intellectually inclined, more cognitively inclined to, of course, these people would probably be more likely to bring into articulation and ask questions about not just feel the nihilism, but make conclusions or draw questions about the ultimate nature of things. But then their mind can't break from it. And I thought in some sense, you could say the people that she's working with are like a little microcosm of a macrocosm of a lot of people.
That's right, yeah.
And that one of the reasons I wanted to have you check that out is because I think it's people like her and her clients, right? That I think are many of the people who will be reading your work and are reading your work, right?
Yeah.
Like specifically people who are very in the postmodern ethos, right? Like in this particular technological configuration that are suffering in a very acute way, a kind of nihilism, right? Often not named as such, right? Yet is something that seems to be really compounded. I agree with Rosen's work on this, and that I feel like nihilism is a perennial issue. Like all human beings throughout time, right? Nihilism on some level is an issue. It's hard to imagine religiosity as such arising if there's something about our existential structure, if you will, that begs that question or has us contend with it. However, man, it seems like with technology, especially right in our particular time, that it seems to be at a level that I don't know if it's ever been like this before. I know that you call it a default nihilism. Yeah.
Though, in terms of if I could just refer to God in the between, what I try to do there, I talk about the atheist as a kind of it takes up residence in all of us thinkers in the sense that it's a guest of sorts. And in one sense, the conversation with the atheist in ourselves never ceases. But the way I try to approach it is to treat the question of God, at least at the outset, not as a foreground question. That the terms of reference that we have created in modernity and in late modernity tend to, by their very nature, to occlude the significance of the question. Because we live in the world in a certain way and we conceive of things, we bring an orientation on things that actually already have decided behind our backs. The question doesn't arise in a rich and meaningful way. So I make this distinction between what I call the first ethos of being, or the primal ethos, and the reconfigured ethos of being. And every epoch has to configure and reconfigure what's given to us in the primal givenness of being. But modernity in particular has certain characteristics that that already produce a certain desacralization of being, that strip away from what is given to us any signs, ambiguous or otherwise, of something more than ourselves in this more religious and sacral sense. We tend to elevate ourselves then into autonomous agents over against a desacralized world. And our image of God that comes to the fore, for instance, early on in modernity, the deistic God, as a kind of the clockmaker God outside the world, creating a mechanistic totality.
Yeah.
And the intimacy between us and the sense of the divine is clearly evacuated in that particular picture. And
Yeah.
there's a certain sense in which that evacuated while earlier epochs were intuitively and immediately in contact with. So
Yeah.
I do think you have to look at the reconfigured ethos of modernity, but in and through a consideration of that, try
Yeah.
to recover some sense of what is more primal in
Yeah.
the given ethos of being. So being in
Yeah.
between works towards that, then tries to raise again the question of God with more rich resources
Yeah.
of a metaxological sort.
Yeah.
But it changes how we dwell in the midst of things. Metanoia, as the theologians, a kind of conversion of mindfulness is needed to
Yeah.
look on things differently and look on ourselves differently.
Yeah.
And so there is a kind of, strangely enough, the struggle with atheism itself is a kind of religious passion that really can't be made any sense of in purely atheistic terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the passion of the atheists to affirm atheism as the final position,
Yeah.
there's something strangely
Religious about that.
religious
Yeah.
about that, despite the overt statements.
Yeah.
But that asks a certain, I mean, Ryan Dunn's, and whom you had, he treated my work as a set of spiritual exercises for a secular
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
And I think he's getting at something very important there, that
Yeah.
you can't just have an abstract theory that you read on the page
Yeah.
and you evaluate it. You have to enter into a kind of
Yeah.
a way. You have to pass it
Yeah.
on different ways to see
Yeah.
what the possibilities are. And
Yeah.
that sense of being on the way and sometimes being off the way, and that there are many ways,
Yeah.
and that some of them are more adequate than others. That's very important to the metaxological way or
Yeah.
ways, because I do think there are ways
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to the divine, to God, to different senses of God's, and
Right.
each of them with different stresses and strengths and
Yeah.
limitations and so on. So that's, but I got the sense at least in the part of it that I had watched, that she had left one house and was trying to rebuild her life in a new house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a sense of her genuineness
Yeah.
was communicated. There's no question about that at all.
Totally.
But the fuller terms of reference, I do think, also mean we have to look on everything differently, in fact. The mysterious fact that there is something at all, the mysterious fact that we are born sometimes with this, again, just simply go on too long, but I try to distinguish between what I call the absurd as just lacking any significance and what I call a benign absurd. Something could be absurd in the sense that there is no, it has a singularity about it, or I think our existence has a singularity about it, a certain contingency. It is what it is,
Yeah.
but it's not absurd in the sense of silencing further questions as to what the notion of a benign absurd is, a sort of a limit in which there is the potential for an opening to something that isn't just merely absurd.
Yeah.
For instance, I think we experience that in laughter. True humor
Yeah.
is absurd, but
Yeah.
something of festive energy breaks through in the best
Yes.
of laughter.
Yes.
And so laughter and humor, some aspects of it can be very nihilistic.
Yeah.
Everything, nothing counts for, you don't take anything with ultimate seriousness, and yet in the laughing, something of
Yeah.
the very energy of life itself keeps resurrecting itself.
Yeah.
And there's something affirmative that it remains mysterious and we participate in it, but don't necessarily understand it. Its
Yeah.
absurdity is transformed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that religion, in the best sense, really has something of that sense of the mysteriousness.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
a threshold of the finite, of finite intelligibility. there's something more. And again,
Yeah.
these are sophisticated terms for most people. I acknowledge that. And for most people, their sense of the religious is concretized through
Yeah.
membership of a community. Or
Yeah.
so there's a solitary pathway in religion also, which in some ways is the more difficult pathway. The
Yeah.
path of the mystic is often a very solitary pathway,
Yeah. Yeah.
going to the verges of a kind of nihilism, the feeling that there's nothing there, but somehow the nothingness is also, it shines with a secret sense of a divinity.
Yeah.
And I think you find that in the best of the mystics myself, that the fullness and the emptiness,
Yeah.
they can't be separated from each other. Sometimes the emptiness is full, actually, just
Yeah.
as the fullness has an emptiness to it that makes us wake
Yes.
up
Yeah.
and ask what really is there, what really is being communicated to
Yeah.
us.
What emptiness is this? Yeah. Yeah.
The sense of the ethos, the ethos of being in the ancients and the medievals, even though they experienced despair, they experienced melancholy, sadness, suffering, pain, all these things that we as humans are open to. Nihilism in the modern sense is a particular configuration where we have, as it were, shut the door to a sense of ultimate intelligibility that goes beyond the terms of the immanent world. And I think there are reasons for that, but it's not something that is of the essence of the human being. It
Yeah.
has its epical. Again, you're a great admirer of Heidegger,
Yeah.
and Heidegger has that sense of the epical communication of being.
Yeah.
And there is a certain sense in which there is an epical nihilism,
Yeah.
but I don't think that exhausts the meaning of being, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah.
I know it was, at least if what I have written has any truth,
Yeah.
it's not it can be it can break things open,
Yeah.
but we have to find other language that isn't just simply nihilistic, and ways of living that are not just nihilistic.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I want to get what you were saying about, because it really struck me, about this reconfigured ethos is particular. What I heard you say is it's particular in the sense that that there's the primal ethos from which we come out of, and then we're always reconfiguring that ethos in a second configuration. And that this one seems to, what comes into the foreground is things show up already absurd. They show up already disenchanted. But what I'm hearing is with a air of so given that you can't even question it. Like it's just the way that it is, a meaninglessity or something like that. Is that basically what you're saying? Yeah.
That's how the way we live in the world, the way we treat ourselves, the way we have ambitions in this direction or that direction. It's an entire configuration, but it's one in which this or more secret porosity to divine communication has already been closed off.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, we come to the realization that there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But we then take that to be the picture of the world that is more true.
Yeah.
And it has a relative truth, but it hasn't ultimate truth, because there's a certain sense in which we ourselves are the carriers of this nihilism. Yeah. We are the creators of nihilism. Nihilism itself is a configuration of being by us. But when we think more deeply on it, on its very nature, its very possibility is sustained by something that can't be described in simply nihilistic terms. You know, that point we were making earlier on?
Yeah.
If we claim nihilism is true, we see the truth of nihilism by a light that is not itself nihilistic. There's a light that allows us to see the truth of nihilism that in an inverse way actually shows us that nihilism isn't true. Because the light, that we see something to be true at all seems to indicate a light that isn't simply dependent upon our construction.
Yeah.
And if nihilism is one construction, then it can be taken apart, it can be deconstructed and so on. That's not, I wouldn't deny that. Just as certain configurations of a religious being can be taken apart.
Yeah.
And their relativity, their limitations exposed.
Yeah.
But we're already in a space I sometimes use, we're in the between, that testifies mysteriously to an enabling power or enabling powers that don't get foregrounded in the constructions that we make.
Yeah.
We live in the constructions
Yeah.
and forget the enabling powers.
Yeah. Totally.
And part of philosophy and spiritual life is to try and keep mindfulness of these enabling powers more to the fore. Remember them.
Yeah.
Especially when we get into a configuration which seems to be a dead end, because in a certain sense, nihilism leads to nothing.
Yeah.
And then I don't think it's enough then to just begin to preach about human freedom and our ability to create values. That seems to me to be another. It evades the full dimensions of nihilism by trying to rehabilitate the human person as the creator of values. But that can't be, for me, that's not nihilistic enough in relation to ourselves. Again, in my work, I talk about this, the return to zero. There's a return to zero that nihilism enables, but zero can be an interface with creation, a new interface with creation. It needn't be, again, just simply the dismantling of all previous constructions. It can be that point of opening in which the renewal of these more secret and I think also perennial and constant endowments of being, of human being, can be renewed. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing you say is I get the sense that light is hard to see, right? That light is like at our blind spot. It's like trying to see your own eyeball in some sense, but following that light into its source is something like following it back into the primordial ethos.
That's right. It's like Plato's great image of the sun in the Republic. The sun allows us to be able to see things. The sun enables being and growing in the world that is given to us.
Yeah.
But we don't pay attention to the light as such, or what enables growing and what enables us to see intelligibility and truth and so on. So that metaphor is a kind of reminder that there is a mysterious other source that is more primordially enabling of the powers that we have. See, again, there are those who say, well, it's just all will to power. I think power is very important. We're empowered. We have powers. Even the word virtue itself is the word for power, virtus. But they're enabled powers. They're endowed powers. They're not just self-enabling. I think human beings are relatively self-enabling, but only on the basis of powers that they're already endowed with. And one of the most mysterious ones is that we're thinking, mindful beings who have a strange double relation to being as given, that we're both, there's a kind of an intimacy and a strangeness, this intimate strangeness of being that I talked about, that it's strange in the sense that there's a mysteriousness to it, and we can become estranged from it. But there's an intimacy also that always brings us back home, so to say. And modern nihilism has forgotten about being brought back home, what it means to be brought back home. And I think that certainly in my own work, I see that as one of the motivating impulses to
brought back home.
the zero with me.
Yeah.
I'm making a zero with my fingers at the moment, but zero is an emptiness. There's nothing there in the center of zero, but it's also an opening through which can pass. I think a kind of, if I can use a kind of more religiously tinged word, something, we're graced with something that passes through emptiness into us. This is to some degree what I mean by the porosity of being, that we are this more primal porousness to, we call it the divine, and that's a name for something that endows us and enables us to be. But and of course there are deep questions as to what that endowing source is. I think myself in the deeper reflection brings us to the sense of the question of the goodness of that endowing source, and a question which is very much bound up with nihilism also. But just the experience of nihilism can be a threshold of a kind of resurrection of astonishment before the given world, before ourselves, before our own being, that we are, as Augustine says, a question to ourselves. We become newly.
Enabling source. This kind of,
Yeah.
and in some sense, what I'm hearing is like, in some way, the opening, right, that affords us to see that light that we rarely notice coming from the background or the primordial ethos. It's that opening that if we enter into that, in other words, if we go into, say, something like our nihilism fully, that there's something about that can have us catch a glimpse of that
Yes.
non-appearing light, right? That's lighting up the nihilism in some sense.
We potentially can become newly porous. The porosity can be purged of false images of divinity, for instance. But it also has to be purged of false images of ourselves, and indeed false images of the world, because we can have a false image of the world in which we say it's just a there-ness, totally lacking in any value, totally lacking in any sign of communication from a source beyond itself. We can have a false image of ourselves as the master and possessor of nature, like Descartes had. So the process of purgation, so to say, of the porosity can reach out in different dimensions, not only in relation to the divine, but in relation to ourselves and the nature of the world. You know, when earlier there again, thinking of Ryan Dunn's, and one figure in his book is Charles Taylor. And Charles Taylor is quite famous for talking about what he calls the buffered self.
The buffered self, yes.
And I've written about this. I had an engagement with Taylor almost 10 years ago now in Rome.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube, yeah. But I've been talking about he talked about the medievals and so on being porous. But I've made the argument that porosity isn't just confined to any one epoch. It's not ancient, it's not medieval, it's not modern. It's constitutively human. There's a porosity of our being. So the buffering of the self in modernity is a particular development and configuration, but it configures something that at a deeper level is actually this porosity. The buffered self is the porous self that has closed itself off from certain things that might actually transform its own sense of itself. And I think that's that's very crucial in my own way of thinking.
Totally. It would, and if I were to ask you, like, so I would imagine there are ways in which we can find ourselves clogged, right?
Yeah.
And we can unclog, and we can become more porous, right? What is that? What are some of the means by which the human being realizes more of the porosity that they ontologically already are? What are some of those means of doing that, would you say?
I think, in for instance, if you want the thing that's most ongoing for human beings is everyday life, for instance. If we weren't porous to other human beings, we couldn't get out the door in the morning. So I do think we can become more mindful of the fact that so much of our being in relation to others and ourselves has an ineluctable receptivity to it. We are always in receipt of communications from beyond ourselves in everyday life. An image that I have often used actually is the process of breathing. We breathe in, we breathe out. We breathe in, we breathe out. Breathing is a kind of elemental, incarnate porosity that if we close it off in a very short, I often would give students the challenge to hold their breath for 3 minutes and see what happens. So we live out of this oscillation back and forth, in and out. So that's at an ongoing, but we tend to think of ourselves as kind of sovereign selves moving through a space that is unanswerable to us. But I would say then beyond that, great aesthetic moments and great artworks of great power to reopen the porosity. For instance, the experience of beauty.
Yeah.
Beauty strikes us.
Yeah.
And it opens us to an otherness that we don't initially have. There's a kind of a dimension of the involuntary when we're struck by the beautiful.
Yeah.
The beautiful feels open.
Yes.
The work of art is an invitation for us to.
Yeah.
It's not merely. Sometimes work does strike us. And
Yeah.
I think later Heidegger's interest in the artwork and the dialogue with the poet
Yeah.
is very much zoned to reopening this porosity at a more primal level.
Yeah.
He might speak of it in terms of aletheia, for instance. That's another issue that could be taken up. But I think the Prince's or ethical life.
Yeah.
And again, not to dwell on these things more extensively, but this sense of responsibility that we have as ethical beings.
Yeah.
Care for the others. It's not just people caring for us, but our own care for infants, for instance, children.
Right.
Care for sick people, care for older people.
Yeah.
That opens a kind of a non-utilitarian porosity that speaks to some close to the most elemental dimensions of our inseparability from all other beings, other human beings. We experience it, we experience it in the midst of nature too, I think. Nature, going for a walk, solitary walk, or with other people in the countryside, the beauty of the sea, the mountains, the trees, the fields, and so on. These take us outside of ourselves. They reopen the porosity.
Yeah.
And of course, I think religions, the practices of religions, both liturgical, ceremonial, meditative, mystical, prayerful.
Yeah.
All those things are ways of trying to keep that porosity open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And alas, I think modernity has tended to not merely underappreciate them, but turn them into merely subjective dimensions that have no real, if they're acknowledged at all, they're treated as secondary, or then at a certain point they're treated as superfluous, and there's supposedly some scientific way of understanding all of being that answers all the questions, which is complete betrayal, really, of the full dimensionality of our human openness to being.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes, just again to round off that thought, it's we're reopened by surprise. We sometimes can't calculate in advance that something hits us when a person looks at us in a certain way.
Yeah.
At the checkout, for instance, the checkout person smiles, or these things can enter into the texture of our lives.
Yeah.
A person who's in despair, for instance, and if they experience a smile of hospitality from a stranger, that can have a kind of almost redemptive power in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
And so and I take it your own institute is trying to find forms in which something like this is going on. You're trying to find ways of interacting with other human beings in which this porosity is opened up, coaxed, wooed out of its own closedness into itself.
Yes.
It is a sacred work, in fact, in the language that I would use, certainly.
Yeah.
It's not merely moral, it's not merely ethical, it goes to the roots of our being and opens us to the roots of being beyond ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Like encircling, that's the thing. The thing about it is, in some sense, relating with thou in such a way that there's something that in that reciprocity that starts to open up is more, there's a moreness there, right? That's irreducible to any to me, to you, and you can feel it and you can notice it. And it's, in fact, we use a lot of the words of opening deeply, like these porosity words. There's definitely a sense of, my sense is that it's human relationship, which I would say is the most immediate place of the overdeterminate, where the possibility of the overdeterminate can strike you in that visceral way.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's some line I think it's in Wordsworth somewhere, where he talks about how the face of every man or human being that passes me by is a mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, Wordsworth begins a certain form of poetry that is not just simply aristocratic.
Yeah.
It's democratic in the sense of all human beings are part of a community that.
Yeah.
So the face of the singular.
Yeah.
I think I do think generally that enters into quite a lot of romantic art, which is a kind of displacement of the religious sense of sacredness into the aesthetic. That's the whole issue unto itself. But probably for a lot of people of the kind of elites, the cultural elites of the 20th century, they did think that art would be a kind of successor to old-fashioned religion. But I think that if it is a successor, it's only because there's a kind of a secret brotherhood or sisterhood between the aesthetic and the religious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Focused around the sense of intimate mystery.
Yeah.
Which I take is what you're getting at when you talk about the overdeterminate in the kind of technical terms that I have used.
Yeah, that which evokes wonder for sure. The one question, right, that strikes me about this that I wanted to ask you about, I asked Brittany about this too, which was, and I would imagine that this question starts to speak at, right, this opening of nihilism, right, in some way, but why is it that nihilism hurts so much? Or another way of asking that is the fact that nihilism, right, when we undergo it, that it hurts in all the ways that it does. What does that reveal about us? Yeah. It was just a question that I think maybe points, maybe even in a deeper way, to the opening of nihilism. Is it, I guess the simplest way to ask the question is like, why is it that nihilism hurts so bad? Or another way of saying that is, why is that nihilism inherently hurts us? What does that reveal about us? What does that reveal about the world? What does it reveal about being? What do you make of that? Why does nihilism hurt? What does that tell us about us? Tell us about the world. Tell us about life and being.
Yeah, there's a strange sense in which nihilism, it shouldn't protest at all. If nihilism is the truth of being, it should be greeted with the fact that we do experience it as a distress indicates that it's shadowed by the anticipation of something that is meaningful.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument that the nihilist is finally waking up from the illusions of meaning. But that makes no sense, because the very statement of nihilism is itself a statement of a position that wants to be meaningful in some sense.
Yeah.
So I think that what the distress of nihilism is shadowed by the anticipation that there is a meaning to things, even though we can't state it adequately or satisfactorily.
Yeah.
So it's shadowed by its own secret positive, so to say, not by the nihil, but something about being itself as more than nihil, more than nothing.
Yeah.
And again, that's not a theoretical position. It's a lived orientation that constitutes the human being as already in a curve of becoming towards a sense of meaning and truth that isn't just merely nihilistic.
Yeah, so
nihilism is a
wise
wound.
distress. It's a revealing distress.
It's a revealing distress, yeah. It's a distress in the way that a wound is a distress to a body that anticipates itself or lives itself when it's at its best in a healthy way.
Yes.
But somehow the healthiness has leached out of the system,
Yeah.
and it finds itself
Yeah.
seeking. But in a strange way, if nihilism is the last word, you shouldn't even be seeking, because
Yeah.
there's nothing to seek.
Yeah.
And of course, it's just not our nature.
Yeah.
The way Sartre ends up being in nothingness by saying man is a useless passion. But that's a beautiful phrase, very striking, but in a way it's utterly incoherent, because there's something about the passion of being that, if it is useless, it should not be at all, even as a passion. It's a gesture of despair rather than a statement of illuminating wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
The passion of being, the passion of being in us in the
Yeah.
end is for some meaning or truth or intelligibility that
Yeah.
actually illuminates the world, illuminates us,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not just merely in a scientific sense.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
there's, to me, there's no escape from that except by a kind of, people do have distractions, for instance. Somebody like Kierkegaard and Pascal are very good on this, that we distract ourselves
Mm.
into
Mm.
spending our time, passing the time,
Mm.
without facing up to some of these perplexities and distresses.
Yeah.
Or we can, I think, be practical nihilists in the kind of will to power that we bring to bear on dominating our fellow human beings or
Yeah.
conquering nature and so on. But all of those are something in the deeper essence of the human being is betrayed, I think, by
Yeah.
those ways of acting.
Yeah.
And as a phrase I use, there is a kind of homing instinct in the human being. It fascinates me the way, for instance, salmon will return to the river where they were spawned, the way eels go out into the Sargasso Sea and so on and find their way back, the way
Yeah.
birds as homing creatures can somehow go across continents and oceans.
Yeah.
There's something about the human being that is a homing
Yeah.
creature in a metaphysical sense.
Yeah.
And so we need to recover the meaning of seeking home, seeking to be at home
Yes.
in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And therefore, the homesickness of nihilism is telling you that there's a home to find, right?
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the worst nihilism then is to tell you that you should be weaned off your homesickness.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, that homesickness is just a sickness rather than a homesickness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that begs the question, if homesickness is a sickness, what is health?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a healthy human being?
Yeah.
Does it mean to be homeless? What does homelessness mean?
Yeah.
Yes, there's a sense in which we are homeless in the universe, but it's a paradoxical homelessness because it's perhaps never at home in any finite good or fixation. But that kind of homelessness is again the twin of a seeking for a deeper sense of being at home.
Yeah.
I would say that, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, and I really appreciated, and I think it was an earlier work of yours. I think it had the word perplexity in it, being in the
Perplexity and ultimacy, metaphysical thoughts from the middle. That was the name of it.
yeah.
Perplexity
That's
and ultimacy.
yeah. I appreciated some of the autobiographical aspects of that at the beginning of the book, where you talked about like this. And one of the things that struck me, and you put some words to a feeling that I didn't know I didn't have a word for until you named it, was like when you talked about moving from, I think, Ireland to America and the homesickness that you felt. But then you went back to Ireland, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like you were back home exactly. Something else had changed, right? When you went back.
Yeah.
How did you describe
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
It's being at home and not being at home,
Yeah.
or vice versa, not being at home and being at home.
Yeah.
So you could go into exile, so to say,
yeah.
and pine for the first home, but if you go home, you might find that you're not at home in the same way as you were before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, you can think that part of the trick, so to say, of this double condition is to be at home and not being at home,
Yeah.
and finding in not being at home that you are in a certain sense at home. The
Yeah.
conjunction, the twinning of the two, they're like Siamese twins.
Yeah.
And I think myself that a creative energy emerges out of that tension between those two, the joining together of those two sides of things.
Yeah, totally.
I actually think it's a description of the human condition. We're in one sense at home in the world, and in another sense we're not at home.
Yeah.
And we can become relatively at home in things and never completely at home. And yet there are moments when we're entirely at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we long for those moments of full being at home.
Right.
Again, I would take actually some experiences of beauty or the sublime or great works of art or religious meditation, religious practices.
Right.
They give us a mysterious intimation of what it might mean to be at home, while not denying that we're not entirely at home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that actually in the book that's going to be published later this year. I return to those experiences quite recurrently because the kind of Irish dimension of my own soul, so to say, is very much central there. But it's in this back and forth, this betweening between the first home and the second home, and the enrichment and complexification of life that can occur in that process of betweening.
And I'm hearing kind of echoes of the restlessness of desire there, right?
Yeah.
The kind of way that you talk about that, I appreciate the way that you talked about like the sense of the longing, right? Is the way that what you long for is intimate, right?
Yeah.
Like I really get that sense of that there's something very primordial about being at home and not feeling totally at home. That actually, that in between place is where one continually finds themselves dwelling as their home. Yeah, there's so much going on about being a human.
That restlessness of desire. Back in the 1980s, I published a book called Desire Dialectic. What was it? Desire Dialectic and Origin? No, Desire Dialectic and Otherness, an essay on origins.
Yeah.
But the notion of desire, that was really, that emerged out of the doctoral dissertation I wrote when I was at Penn State. I had published a book in 1986 called Art in the Absolute, because after I got my PhD, there were a few publishers that had an interest in what I had written, but they got cold feet because I was actually doing philosophy rather than reporting on someone else's results. But again, so this book, Desire Dialectic and Others, is a kind of slight revision, some stuff left out from the doctoral thesis. But that experience of desire is not something that you self-consciously call up. Desire is a happening. We find ourselves already in desire. There's something primordial about its restlessness. And again, I've there and elsewhere defended something infinitely restless about human desire. It's not like finite desire for this thing or that thing or the other thing. It goes beyond all finite determinate objects. So that restlessness is the source of our misery at times, because we're never entirely happy. But it's also the source of our greatness and grandeur, because it sends us in search of something more than ourselves. Sends us in search of ourselves, even as more than what we've previously settled for. So that, and of course, like desire, especially in the Platonic and in the Augustinian, when Plato talks about eros, he talks about eros as a metaxou, in between the mortal and the divine. That's very important in what I've been doing. But also, Augustine's quest for God is driven by this infinite restlessness. And I think that Augustine is right, that and you see this in certain thinkers who have that kind of restless, desire, restless. People like Pascal, for instance, Nietzsche had it. Dostoevsky had it. Some thinkers are not creatures of that infinite restlessness.
Yeah.
in quite the same measure of intensity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the trouble with the infinite restlessness too is that it can become so disillusioned with itself and with not finding full
Yeah.
satisfaction that it goes into a spiral of
Yeah.
despair about itself. So
Right.
this is again where the nihilism can come in.
Yeah.
Again, in all the great religious traditions, the discipline of desire, in the sense of finding a pathway in which desire does not wrongly overreach itself
Yeah.
and go in
Yeah.
search of false phantoms and so on. This is deeply present in the major religious traditions.
Yeah.
And I think it's very much bound up with the question of nihilism in modernity also, because desire
Yeah.
seems to have no object anymore. It doesn't seem to have an orientation anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
disoriented. Anything could be its object and nothing is really its object. And it has
Totally.
somehow the homing instinct of desire towards the divine
Yeah.
gets garbled. Our desires can become garbled, and
Yeah.
we're not zoned on things that truly fulfill us as human beings. And nihilism is also symptomatic in that sense. It's like the canary in the coal
Yeah.
mine, saying that there's something deficient about the whole spiritual ethos of
Yeah.
our society. Something, we're not being fed. We're not getting the breath. We're not breathing in clean air from
Yeah.
the atmosphere around us.
Yeah.
And so it's a total. It can be a total picture from the point of view of deficiencies in our, in one sense, hugely successful and hugely rich societies, but from a spiritual point of view, hugely
Yeah.
impoverished.
Totally.
It's
Totally. Yeah. And what's strange is we have our desires met more quickly, more rapidly, more instantly than ever before. Yet we're probably hungrier than we've ever been.
there's somebody offering fulfillment at every turn of the road.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
when we partake, we're as hungry as ever.
Yeah.
Some people,
Yeah.
you can think of the extremes of, on the one hand, anorexia, and on the other hand, being overweight.
Yeah.
But anorexia is a response to a spiritual condition. I think also it's physical and spiritual at the same time.
Totally.
But also, our overindulgent culture is also a sign of an anxiety that is pushed under
Yeah.
by our hyperactive consumption of things.
Yeah. I can't help but think about, this brings up just this way where it's always seemed to me that the sacred and suffering are very close to each other. Like they're very close to each other. And it's interesting because, the Buddhism has some amazing practices, right, around desire. I went to a 10-day Vipassana retreat when I was in my early 20s. It was really life-changing. But it's basically, you go there and it's all silent. You're not allowed to make eye contact with anybody. And you sit basically 11 hours a day. And you sit and meditate 11 hours a day. And I had never meditated before, really. So I threw myself in the deep end of the pool. And I remember sitting I think it was my first or second sit of the first day. And I was sitting there, right? And I'm trying to do the meditation and focus on my breath and bring my attention back. And then I'm sitting there and halfway through the meditation, I start to notice this thing that is the most familiar thing at all that I hardly take note of, which is this underlying restlessness, this kind of underlying dissatisfaction, disquiet, agitation. And it was really interesting feeling it in that level, and then not, because I realized so much of what I did in my life was I'd touch on that agitation and I'd immediately zoom out and do something or say something, right? My whole, at least how it occurred for me is so much of my life was at the effect of avoiding this feeling that is the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, I understand.
And what was interesting was, but then the whole thing was just to sit with it and notice it and to be the presence, right? And not quench it, but be with the restlessness. And it was, the first 3 days were just it was the wrestling match from hell, like dealing with my mind. And I think so many people could probably relate with this. But then things started to open up, right? And it was this sense of, I started to realize that that I think a lot of the interpretations of Buddhism is get rid of desire.
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience of it. My experience was, it was like the desire there's a source quality to desire, that when you constantly are thrown to satisfying desire, right, you miss the source of the desire. And as I started to feel like I was able to relax into that source, a whole other dimension, I became porous to a whole other dimension that opened up, of spaciousness,
Yeah.
of an intrinsic sense of meaning of the very sensations in my body, and like the wood on the walls, and just this kind of sense of kind of God coursing through things in some sense. It was really
Yeah.
interesting. And I say it was something like, in letting go of the object of desire and then relaxing back into the current of desire itself. It's almost, if you relax deep enough, you'll find what you've always been desiring the whole time at the very source.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. That's part of our difficulty, is that our desire is zoned on objects, this, that, and the other. And if there isn't an object, we go in search of another object to fill the emptiness, so to say. But
Yeah.
take away these objects, then that restlessness is going to emerge.
Yeah.
And part of sitting in meditation is actually letting it emerge and dwelling with it,
Yeah.
and discovering that with patience, and again,
Yeah.
patience is a word of suffering in the sense of receiving.
Yeah.
Something comes to the fore that had been overridden, so to say,
Yeah.
by the restlessness itself.
Yeah.
I think we Westerners in particular, our restlessness is an overriding.
Yeah.
Instead of letting what I call the passio ascendi be, this conatus ascendi, this drive for being, this endeavor to be, takes over.
Yeah.
And it gets out of kilter with the deeper patience of being, the deeper passio ascendi, and the deeper porosity of being.
Yeah.
And I haven't myself undertaken Buddhist discipline in the sense that you have just described, but I can understand it perfectly. And I suppose there's a certain sense in which I'm a kind of a Buddhist without ever, as it were, getting my trade union cards as a Buddhist.
Yeah.
From the point of view, do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh yeah, totally.
There's a dimension to the restlessness that isn't just restless in that sense of the drive of self to fixate on another object.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of restlessness that then can open up into a mindfulness of something more ourselves that is at work in ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, a thought that has a certain Augustinian resonance in the sense of when he talks about God as being more intimate to me than I am to myself.
Yeah.
The second intimacy is the opening up at a deeper level below this anxious restlessness to be zoned on this object and this object.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes a certain, almost a trust, let's call it a trust, or a faith even, that there is something at work.
Yeah.
That has to be let be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to find it if you keep overriding this other deeper side of what it means for us to be.
Yeah.
And again, as I say, I do think that religious practices of certain kinds of prayer, meditative traditions, whether in one religion or the other, mystical traditions, very often are very close to somehow trying to find. It has a singular aspect to it, but it also has a communal aspect in that isn't just simply a matter of narcissistic subjectivity. Quite the opposite. It's absolutely the inverse of narcissistic subjectivity.
Yeah. Totally.
It's release from narcissistic subjectivity.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it was like, it's something about, doesn't, where the word relationship, because it comes from relata, and doesn't relata originally mean to bear?
I'd have to get out my Latin dictionary now to go back into the etymology. But
I think I
yeah,
heard
to, yeah,
John Becky talk about that, but there's this way where I keep thinking about, this sense of, and to bear something is, you could also say to suffer something, right? This kind of, this way where, because there's all kinds of ways to suffering, right? Like not all suffering is going to lead you to enlightenment, right?
yeah, no,
But there are the kind of suffering that we're talking about. It seems to be, in some sense, this relational component of really bearing and suffering
right,
through it, right? With this patience. And as you talk about that, there's a trust that there's something good about that, right? There's something
right.
meaningful about that. Even if you can't see it, you can trust that it's there.
Yeah, we tend to think of suffering just only in connection with pain,
Yeah.
but suffering has a wider significance of
Oh,
this receptivity to what
yeah.
is other to ourselves. We suffer others, and sometimes the suffering carries with it pain, and sometimes the pain is unbearable.
Yeah.
But I suppose one of the things would have to think about too, bearing suffering, to what extent we bear and are born, that we're, in the sense of, if you bear something, you carry it,
Yeah.
but we're also carried, that side of an otherness that in fact carries us.
Yeah.
Lifts us up. It's not just self-carrying, and it's not just the unbearable, that phrase, the unbearable lightness of being. We think of the unbearable as something that has to be
Yeah.
fled from,
Yeah.
but being borne up, being someone else bears us. I mean, that would be a very interesting line of reflection. And I mean, that's interesting, though, what you ask about relate. I wouldn't mind just checking out. I was thinking of Hegel's notion of sublation, for instance. The etymology goes back to the Latin word for tolo legere, tuli, the last word is latum, or relatum. It'd be interesting. It has the meaning of carrying, of bearing again, the carrying something.
Yeah. Totally.
So it would be sometimes, it's a thing that Heidegger is a very good witness to, hearing in words things that carry a whole sense of the world.
Oh, yeah.
A word is a kind of mnemonic
Yeah.
of sense of the world.
Yeah. He's really,
And he often brings to the surface again, renews the sense of these layers in a word. To be honest with you, I think in my own practice of writing, that's very much present also. I'm very self-conscious about
I agree.
it. Not always, and sometimes the fullness of words pass me by, and then I might later stop and realize that this word has carry. So it'd be interesting for me to just go back and look at that, because the word relation occurs over and over in our discourse and in my discourse also. So
Yeah.
that sense of bearing, of being born
Yeah.
at the same time.
And it's funny when you think about it, like in a certain sense, and I thought about this through meditation of like when you're sitting there and your knees burning, right? That the instructions are basically be with it fully, right? Feel the whole
Right.
thing. There's a kind of fidelity, right? There's a kind of marrying quality, right? To that pain that is inherently reveals, just like a marriage does, right? Reveals more than itself in some way. There's a kind of fidelity to this kind of suffering that we're talking about or bearing.
Yeah. Where we say to somebody, we're trying to give an explanation, bear with me.
Yeah.
Asking for that attention and receptivity.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is also an act of trust. You're having an argument with someone, you said, bear with me. And then you try to give an explanation of what happened to justify the trust that has been placed in you and so on. It's an interesting word. I hadn't given it much thought now, but you've set me off wondering what worlds would be revealed by looking at these movies.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Totally. That's great. Yeah. But something about when you talked about the narcissism, right? That you could say this kind of bearing of suffering in this sense, right? Is almost the inverse of narcissism. And I'm a big fan of Rilke. I've been reading Rilke since I was like a teenager.
Oh,
And
I'm a great fan too. Yeah.
yeah. And you notice he has that, and I've been fascinated with this kind of this transformation in his poetry that I think are housed in the book called New Poems, but it's where where he went and lived with Rodin in Paris and apprenticed
Yeah.
them, and Cezanne and a bunch of different people at that time. And it's really interesting because if you look at Rilke's earlier work before that, it's it's Rilke, so it's gorgeous, but it's dripping in subjectivity. It's got
Yeah.
a lot more
Yeah.
sentimentality about it. Like you got the sense like a mood struck him or something like that. And then he comes out with this. He goes and apprentices with Rodin, and it's interesting to hear him talk about like the thing that he caught sight of was how dramatically from a different come from Rodin was with his art, where
Well, it's yeah.
like where you talked about the discipline of getting up every morning at 5 a.m. and working with the models. And I think the sense was, I think that Rilke was struck by that because it is what he would call is like there was a certain objectivity or a lack of subjectivity or a transformation of subjectivity that was demonstrated by Rodin that he started to catch a glimpse of, right? And
Right.
I use the word objectivity for it, but then he started doing this thing where whereas before he would wait for when the mood would strike him is when he would write poetry, but instead he started scheduling times to write. And
Yeah.
what was really interesting about the new poems is that it's interesting, there's something, these poems strike me as this kind of, I don't know, almost a spiritual practice of some sense, where he would go and sit somewhere like at a windmill or something like that. And he would sit there for hours, and what he would do is he would write a poem that was, in some sense, like in some sense, attempting to speak the windmill and let the being of the windmill arise within the constraints of the poem. Like it was the thing. He wasn't trying to write a poem about the windmill. He was trying to write a poem, right, that the writing of which allowed the being of that windmill to be as that poem. And it completely, you don't see any of his own subjectivity in it. It's this strangely modern reverential relation to the world. And I've been fascinated by those poems and that transformation in him is maybe a hint at one of the ways that I want to say something like one of the possibilities that in modernity, one can start to approach and recover the sense of the sacred from the eminent world in a certain sense.
Yeah. No, that was a very thought-provoking meditation on Rilke there. Yeah, I could see very much in a certain sense, work itself getting one outside of oneself.
Yeah.
And indeed, the discipline of work that he saw in Rodin,
Yeah.
entering into that self-transcendence where the kind of self-concern or self-absorption
Yeah.
is relativized really in relation to a different demand upon the self.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we lose context.
Yes.
Yeah. It's almost like the self in that poetry. What does it do? It's more like the self in some sense is totally giving itself over to where it's not a thing standing over against the other thing. It's like the sight of a deeper disclosure of the world. The self gets to withdraw in the becoming of the world in some sense.
The old idea of the poet as a medium, it's looked on as a romantic excess, but it's certainly present in the ancient world where, even in Plato, the discussion in the Ion of the rhapsode as a kind of a passageway between inspiration and the audience. But I would take seriously the notion of the daimonic intermediacy of the poet. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I sense certainly that is something very present in Rilke at his best, that something passes into him and passes through him and finds utterance.
Yeah.
The ordinary contrast of passive and active don't really operate in terms of their everyday opposition or juxtaposition. That there is a patience, there is also an energized activity.
Yeah.
And somehow the marriage, so to say, of reception and expression, so to say, occurs in the better poems. But without the reception, there can get work-a-day poems that are very well crafted and so on, but there's something not quite alive in the finished work itself. And I think some of the great poets have somehow been at that point of marriage between the receiving and the crafting, so to say, the acting in terms of a craft that then shapes what has been communicated to them.
Yeah, there's like there's a primacy of listening.
Yes. Again, I think those opening of the Duino elegies about the angel, again, it's a lot of people have written about this and interpreted and so on, but certainly the angel as an emissary of another dimension in the ancient world and certainly within the Christian and Jewish scriptures, not God, not human, but something in between. It's a little bit, again, like the sense of the daimon in the Platonic understanding of the metexu of eros. And without the communication of the daimon or the angel, human products they can be excellent in their own way, but there's something, just this extra dimension isn't quite communicated in and through them.
Yeah.
We call it genius, whatever you want to call it, inspiration.
Yeah.
We almost find it's almost impossible to say what it is, but we can recognize it when it happens.
Yeah.
And I think the attitude of gratitude is the attitude that most deeply we feel when something comes to us or is shown to us as inspired, that we're grateful that that has been shown to us, that has been given to us.
Yeah. I very much hear that. And when you've described before, when you talk about like in your writing where I was asking you what it was like to write some of these things. And you say, the longer I do it, the less I understand. I just knew something, it happened. And I had something with it, apparently.
So I was there. But again, I'm just hoping that it passes into the writing itself such that others can actually experience it and feel something of it. That's also the one who is there listening. We who write are listeners. Those who read are also listeners.
Yeah.
And it's not a question of just listening to the writer. It's listening to what is communicated in and through the writer.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, I'm wondering if we should maybe call it a day.
Really good talking with you again, my friend. I'm enjoying know you so much.
I think it's probably better for me to close shop at the moment.
Yeah. So sleep well, my friend.
Okay. We'll be in touch, and I hope we'll be in touch again.
Absolutely.
Thanks a million for our conversation.
Yeah. Thank you too.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now. Okay.